Good evening. Welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. This is a show that is dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. And tonight, some jazz fusion as well. So this is my Sunday night show called Ben's Album Challenge. Basically on this show, what happens is one of my subscribers, Ben, sends me an email for an album with a link, usually with a link, pretty much always with a link, of an album that he wants me to review. Sorry, my screen went down there. Got a little bit of darkness going. Anyways, it's an album he wants me to review, and so I do it on my show. And usually I listen to it 2 or 3 times, and then I review it and give my opinion about it. Pretty much that's all there is to it. Nothing fancy or anything, just that. So before we get into it, the album we're doing tonight is Return to Forever. It's a jazz fusion band from the 70s, a very well-known jazz fusion with a lot of very well-known players. The album we've chosen, or he's chosen for me to do, is called Romantic Worrier. 6 tracks in all on the album. So before we get going, I'll tell you a little bit about the album. So the album was released in 1976. Was recorded at Caribou Ranch Studios in Nederland, Colorado, USA. It's about 45 minutes in length, so probably a little longer than most albums of that time period, but it's all instrumental, so, and you don't have to worry about the vocalist getting tired here. Released on Columbia label, and Chick Corea is the producer of the album. He is also, I believe, the keyboardist. So he's going to move down and get a little bit of information on the personnel here. So oh yeah, okay, here we are. For some reason they got the personnel playing in one color and the technical support in another color, and the technical support is actually brighter, so I wasn't sure what was going on there. Anyways, we've got basically 4 guys on this album, all very notable musicians. A couple of them I even know a lot about because I followed some of the songs from various different groups that had these people involved. The first one is Chick Corea, or Corea, however you want to say it. He plays acoustic piano, Fender Rhodes electric piano, clavinet, Yamaha organ, synthesizers, an Odyssey, and a Micro Moog, Mini Moog 15 Molitor, and Poly Moog, as well as a marimba and percussion on this one album. So he's very active on the album, and I think he writes a fair bit, if not half of the tracks anyways. The second musician on here is Al Di Meola. I don't know if I got that right. I've always had trouble with his name. Playing electric guitars, acoustic guitars, soprano guitar, handbells, and slide whistle. This guy is an outstanding guitar player. I can only tell you that about him. Stanley Clarke, of course. I know Stanley Clarke. He was on that first disc that I told you about that I had those 2 BTO songs on that got me into BTO. There was a song that my friend recorded off the radio by Stanley Clarke and George Duke, and played it a lot. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure I could find it. Emblick, he plays the, okay, maybe I'm not seeing this right. Let me see. Alembic electric bass, that must be the bass name or the type of bass. He plays a piccolo bass as well as an acoustic bass and a bell tree and handbells. And then you have Lenny White, yes, the legendary drummer, jazz drummer, playing drums, timpani, congas, timbals, snare drum, suspended cymbals, alarm clock, and handbells. So those are your musicians that are playing on there. And I have to tell you, having listened to this album several times, There are nothing short of top shelf musicians on this album. All four of these guys are among the best in their fields, I think. Now, I didn't know much about Chick Corea coming into this, but I'm very impressed with his keyboard ability. The guy, his fingers are like blurry when he plays. He's so good. So anyways, that's enough of that. Let's get a little bit into this album here. So, as you know, it's a jazz fusion album. It does have some progressive elements to it, and some rock elements to it. It has a little bit of jazz elements to it, of course, as well. But I think it's primarily a jazz fusion album. It's pretty up-tempo for the most part. There are some somewhat mellow and subdued songs, but not overly. I would say it's pretty up-tempo. The guitars on here are extraordinary. I mean, that guy's picking hand is amazing. And what's more amazing is that his fretting hand is even faster. You know, he just is an amazing guitar player, I think. Definitely a standout, and even amongst these guys, I think his playing was phenomenal. Lenny White, of course, you know, a great drummer, fantastic. And Stanley Clarke, I've always been impressed with his bass playing ability. A very frontal type bass player, like very strong up front type guy. Does some amazing stuff, especially with his fretting hand. I find he's really good. And then, of course, the last guy, which is the guy who wrote most of the stuff on this album, Chick Corea, yeah. His keyboard abilities, because I actually went, and after I listened to the album, I went and I watched a live version of these same four musicians playing the duel of the Jester and the Tyrant, which is one of the tracks we'll talk about. And his hands were just flying around there. He is amazing, like just some real amazing skill and abilities, and not just his keyboard ability, but the synthesizer part and all the different types of keyboards that he plays on the album. His piano is very fantastic as well. Okay, so having said all that, the album overall has a kind of, well, it's very jazz fusion-y, so you know, you don't get as much you don't get as much catchy beats or riffs as you would get on a rock album. You get little runs, or little, you might get kind of like a rhythm section kind of bass and drum melody, and then you have the soloing going on from the other two, and then sometimes you'll get a kind of overall song movement with little solos going on here and there. Just a fantastic array of musicians here. Now, I'm going to be the first one to tell you I'm not a huge jazz fusion guy. It's grown on me a bit, I have to admit. There are some stuff I've listened to that are jazz fusion. I think I would like to think that this comes from the Yes album Relayer, which has a lot of jazz fusion on it. And it was actually the one Yes album I didn't like from that period at first. But it's grown on me over the last 40 years. It's also opened a bit of a doorway for some of these other things to come through that are more jazz fusion-y and much more involved in that field. So I've begun, and then of course there's a show on Sea of Tranquility, which is called Four Fusion Fridays, which is, I do watch it on occasion, and I mean, it's over my head and stuff, but I'm watching it and learning a little bits as we go along. So anyways, we've been 10 minutes into this video and haven't said anything about the music yet. Love it. Okay, so this is, I guess, for some of the guys on my thing who think that I've kind of slowed down a little bit on the length of this particular show. It's going to be a little bit longer tonight. Okay, so the album, the group Return to Forever album, Romantic Warrior. 6 tracks on here. The opening track, Medieval Overture. Some excellent drum rolls here by Lenny White. I would say more like drum fills, actually. Little fills here and there. Guy is like very fast with his hands. You've got some nice keyboard and synthesizers on this track. And I love the ending of this particular track. It is a fantastic keyboard bit right at the end of the track, which is off the charts. This guy is amazing, I think, too. I mean, all four of these guys are amazing. It's just, I just think the keyboardist and the guitarist might be just a little bit better, but it's like comparing apples and oranges. The rhythm section generally gets ignored for the abilities more than the rest of the sections do. Okay, so the second song is called Sorceress. Some nice guitar soloing on this, like really kind of, and then it's mixed in with this kind of really kind of funky rhythm section with the drums and the bass primarily. There's some really nice keyboards on, like jazzy keyboards on this as well, almost like a psychedelic point. There's a point in the song where it has a very psychedelic feel to it as well, which I appreciate because I like that. So the piano bits are exquisite. The melody is quite mellow, but it's kind of a very catchy kind of melody, and that psychedelic bit adds to it. So the third track on this album, The Romantic Worrier, and each of these bits gets a little bit better on this side. Great bass solo, great drum solo, some top-notch piano here. You just can't say enough about this guy's piano and keyboard ability, I think. I really like the piano with the acoustic guitar opening. That was fantastic, I think. And this kind of creates a kind of melody I don't know if it's a melody or more of a melodic. It's probably more of a melodic atmosphere to the album, I think. To this particular track, I mean. Guitar solo, like I said, his picking hand is phenomenal on this guitar solo, and his fretting hand, you can just hear it moving around, going all over the place. That's difficult when you're doing all this and trying to do all this at the same time. That requires a lot of not only technique, but also a lot of practice and a lot of high-level dexterity and ability and agility and skill. All those things rolled into one. He has it all. It's just fantastic. Di Maglio, I can never say his name. Okay, so the next side is side 2. We have 3 more tracks. The opening track is Majestic Dancer. Really heavy, kind of really heavy opening riff and melody, like it's almost rocky here. This is the more progressive element on the album, I think. I love the heavy guitars and the drum solo and the bass and the rhythm section, like the drums and the bass creating that wonderful rhythm section, and with the guitar on top with that kind of soloing going on. And then it ends, of course, with the keyboard, which is like amazing as well. So let me get on to the 5th track here. That particular track, by the way, Majestic Dance, Ben likes me to give my favorite track on the album, and that one is it. That's my favorite track on the album, the 4th one, Majestic Dance. The next one, The Magician. The keyboards and the guitar build this up. They build it up to a certain point, and then it gets quiet for a bit, and there's just this little keyboard part going on before you get some bass fills in there as well. But the guitar bit that goes on for a bit kind of ends the song, but he's just so in it all throughout the entire track, Then you have your last track, which is the one that I watched on the I actually went to look for a live version of it as well, and that's Duel of the Jester and the Tyrant. Okay, so this, of course, was written, according to Stanley Clarke, this was written by Worrier, and he starts it off with a kind of really strong keyboard soloing part, and then it just becomes unbelievable. Like he just goes off the charts on it, and I've seen very few keyboard solos that match this one. Very few, and just it's fantastic. This whole song is pretty strong. It's very jazz fusion-y. Lots of like elements that you would think of as jazz fusion. A lot of that on this track, but the keyboards are the dominant factor, and the solo is like unbelievable. So I gave this song a 6. I gave The Magician a 6, and most of the other songs a 6 or a 5, except for Majestic Dance, which is the one I gave a 7. And you're probably wondering, why are the numbers so low? Well, the instrumentation is not a factor. If it was just based on instrumentation, it'd probably get 10s all the way across. But I'm not a huge, like I said, I'm not a huge jazz fusion type. I prefer music with vocals to it. I like catchy riffs. I like stuff that isn't always about soloing and stuff. And you get a lot of that with jazz and jazz fusion. But I don't dislike it. Like it's pretty catchy. I don't know how often I might listen to an album like this. It wouldn't be very often, but I do appreciate the technical skills, the level of musicianship, and the creativity that went into putting this album together, which I think is just fantastic. So Return to Forever, The Romantic Warrior, a beautiful, beautiful album. I think it's an album I would purchase just because, you know, if I want to move in that direction towards jazz fusion, I think this one certainly would be a big draw for you. One of the bigger bands from the 70s, and also a band that sported some really notable and excellent musicianship and musicians. So I hope you enjoyed this video tonight of Ben's album challenge. I feel like it's a good one tonight. I feel like I was into it and enjoyed it quite a bit. Now Ben has left me next week's. He gave it to me a bit early because he's away, and so we'll be doing one called from a band called Diamond Head, and I haven't really looked at it too much, but I will now that this one is done. So I hope you enjoyed this video tonight. Please like and subscribe. It's much appreciated. And if you have any comments about this group or about these musicians in general, or about their abilities, or anything that maybe I've missed here that needs to be brought to everybody's attention, please make your comments. That would be much appreciated. And you have yourself a good Sunday night, at least in Eastern zone in Canada, or wherever you may be. Please have a good, safe night, and we will see you again next Sunday with another of Ben's album challenges. So take care and have a good night. Goodbye.